What's going on, guys? MariK here with a new Dragon Ball Super mini-series. In this series, we're going to be going over the history of the Dragon Ball Super card game and how it has evolved over the release of its several sets that we have now. We're going to go over the starter decks, we're going to go over the expansions as well, just to see how the game has changed from Set 1 all the way going up into Assault of the Saiyans, which comes out at the beginning of August, so about 2 weeks away. This seemed like a fun idea that I wanted to do, and I thought you guys might be interested to discuss it with me or with each other in the comments as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into Set 1. Galactic Battle. Galactic Battle focuses Red around Universe 6 and the God of Destruction, Champa, and his angel attendant, Vados. There's also some other Universe 6 cards in there as well, mainly from the little mini tournament between Universe 6 and Universe 7. So we've got some Hit, Kaba, etc., stuff like that. But it mainly focuses on the three more popular characters from Universe 6 at the time of release. So the lineup starts off with the Champa leader. At the time, he was not a bad leader at all, and even now with jumping into the future just for a second with the little bit of support he got in the anniversary box, he's somewhat of a more viable leader now. The front side wasn't really too spectacular. It did, however, give you the ability to draw an extra card without having to be awakened. Back then, most leaders didn't draw on the front side like a lot of them do now. But it was more his awakened side, which is the reason why he saw so much play. And the ability to give himself or any of your battle cards double strike, especially if you were able to give a card with critical double strike. That made a huge difference, but also just the fact you give anything double strike, if it had high enough power to be able to just push through for that final bit of damage. Champa's ace card, on the other hand, was spectacular for its time, having triple strike and the ability to wipe a good majority of the cards off your opponent's board, especially getting rid of most, if not every, blocker at that time. None of them were really that high in power anyways, and so that cleared the way for you to be able to just rip through your opponent with that triple strike and be able to push for game. Personally, I don't think the leader is ever going to be anything that's going to be like meta-defining. However, with the anniversary Vados, I do believe that he has a good chance to be competitive somewhat, if maybe at a tier 2 level. The second red leader was Vados, the Angel of Universe 6, and honestly, I really liked this leader. I thought this leader was very niche in its ability to be able to attack battle cards in active mode. I don't believe there's any other leader in the game, even currently, that can do that off the top of my head. But at the time, attacking battle cards in active mode was a very, very rare skill, if really seen at all. We had like a handful of cards that could do it, but to have a leader that could do it any time, and you also didn't have to worry about revenge or anything like that. She could just go through any cards that your opponent had, and you didn't have to worry about it. Being able to attack active battle prevented them from having blockers, because you could just attack the blockers. It prevented them from keeping cards that they were trying to evolve. And she also gained an attack boost to boot, just to kind of ensure that she was going to get the KO on those active battle cards. Personally, I think this was my favorite red leader from Set 1, just because of the versatility that the leader brought to the table. Vados also had a bit more unique support for the archetype than Champa did. While Champa did have a few cards that interacted with the alien trait, Vados just did it better. Like with the 5-drop Vados, you got 2 attacks with her because she had dual attack. You use her ability twice and get 2 free battle cards out. It was only 15,000 or less, but still, that could make a big difference. And, of course, with more alien support to come out in the future, obviously the card was just going to get more targets. Then we've also got the Kaba that goes along with the alien support, and he also got to evolve and come out in active mode to be able to swing again. And I feel like there was a lot of, not symmetry. It was just, the deck flowed really well. It was just, the play was very fluid, the way the Vados stuff and all the alien support kind of worked together. Personally, I think it was, like I said, I think it was the best of the red archetype for Set 1, but it just gave you a lot of different options, and to be able to, granted, you had to get to turn 5 to play the Vados, but to attack twice, get to KO 2 battle cards, and then pull out 2 more, was just awesome. And since back then games didn't end between turns 3 and 5, you know would hit turns 6, 7, 8. So Vados coming out at 5 wasn't a big deal. You get your 2 free cards, and you could possibly evolve both of those cards on the next turn. So it was a completely different game back then. It was a lot slower, and higher cost cards like this that had unique abilities like this just were able to take advantage of their skills more than they would today. The final red leader was the Assassin Hit, and I had mixed feelings about this particular leader. He had his benefits against certain decks, but for the most part, I still preferred Vados or even Champa. He did get an attack boost when he attacked, so that was nice. It allowed him to KO battle cards a little easier. But again, Vados did that, but did that better. On the Awakened side, he had the same ability, but he didn't have to attack a battle card, so he did get the boost there, but being able to attack active battle cards, I think, put Vados a little over the edge compared to Hit. Now, while Hit did have an ability that allowed you to negate your opponent from using blocker, Vados still, again, she could attack active battle cards. And while Hit negated the blocker and frees up his own attack, I still feel like that was a more situational ability than Vados' ability to attack active battle cards. Hit's Ace card, on the other hand, was very unique in its skills, although not so much in the art. It's kind of sad that the Hit SPR is basically the same as the leader art, except a little bit more shiny. But he's not the only one to suffer that, but we'll get into that in another video. The ability to inflict burn damage. Now, burn damage was very, very rare in this game up until recently. There's a good bit in set 7, and some of it's been, dribbling out every now and then here in sets or expansions, a card or two. But with this hit, you could burn your opponent for 2 damage. Now, granted, the damage went to their hand, but still, that's 2 damage. And to be able to just win a game when your opponent's at 2 life just by evolving your hit. And it could also be just easy to get out, too, because you could combine it with the Vados support. Because that 5-drop Vados brings out an alien. Hit is an alien, so you could get the evolve target and then play it. Now, granted, you could also just play the evolve target and evolve it, but it all kind of worked together to allow you to build your deck however you wanted to. This card, even going into set 2, was annoying to deal with. It wasn't anything major, but if you were able to drop this card, it usually meant game, especially because you're going to burn them for 2 damage, and then on top of the damage, they've got to survive the double strike, plus whatever your leader, plus whatever you might also have on the board. And with some of the newer support for Hit, that made that a lot more difficult to endure. Following the trend, blue in set 1 was all centered around Universe 7, which is the universe that Dragon Ball has always been in. So we've got, our Gokus, we've got our Vegetas, we've got the new characters like Whis and Beerus. And while red was all about damage and being aggressive, just, a good aggro deck, blue was more about consistency, maybe. I don't want to say it was about control, because it was more energy manipulation, which is not necessarily control, but it did give you a little bit more control. But it gave you a lot of defensive options. But blue is by far not exactly a defensive color. Blue starts off with its own God of Destruction, Beerus, and honestly, this leader is a little bit more destructive than the Champa leader. While the Champa leader did give you the ability to give any card double strike for extra damage, Beerus actually KO'd things. Like, he was actually a God of Destruction. Now, by current standards, the leader is lackluster, requiring you have to be at 3 or more energy for his ability to kick in. Means you're not really doing a whole lot until you hit turn 3, unless you are playing cards like Objection or other cards that are going to ramp up your energy. And at best, that's still, you're not using his effect till turn 2. And then on the Awakened side, same thing, but he can hit 3 or less. It was a bit better, but having to get to 3 energy for the front side was kind of a pain, but it was easily doable, and to be able to KO anything 3 or less at that particular point in the game was a much bigger deal than it is now. His Activate main is, again, really unique. and just somewhat annoying. To be able to pull that off, you actually had to play defensively, which blue can do no problem. But to get the 16 energy, even back then, while it wasn't nearly as difficult as it is to do now because the game was so much slower, it was still a pretty big stretch because you could easily just also win by the time you got to 16 energy. Because not only do you have to get the 16 energy, but you have to have it open. So if we're playing ramp, you're still going to have to wait until the next turn when you can reset all of your energy to active mode. There's better ways to win with this leader, but that is definitely a much more satisfying way to be able to win. To just start your turn, activate his ability, and then bam, you win the game. Now, Beerus had two different boss cards, and while the Beerus 7 drop didn't actually require your leader to be Beerus, the Whis sure as hell did. The Beerus, as soon as you hit 7 energy and you attack, your opponent's either dropping 2 or getting their board wiped. And I've actually had that happen to where I couldn't discard and my opponent just wiped my entire field. I had nothing. I still managed to come back and win the game. That was with, I believe that was with my Mono Blue Vegito build where I used the Soul Striker. This was set 2 days, and it was just an amazing, impressive victory. But the Whis battle card, on the other hand, is just so much more oppressive. The ability to give yourself a second turn and attack for quadruple strike, and the attack couldn't be negated. And then your leader had to be Beerus anyway, so you could just attack with Beerus to KO whatever blocker they had, and then Whis is just going in and just smashing them to pieces. You wouldn't even have to attack them or give them cards with this leader. You could just wait, stall, bide your time, and then when you get to 12 energy, you drop Whis, you attack with him for 4 damage, it's your turn again, and you just do the same thing. I love the card, but it was a really big pain to try and get it out. It's a little easier now with some of the support we have because we've got more stuff that adds cards to energy and whatever, and I actually managed to get this card out and win with it just over the weekend, which was very, very entertaining. But by back in set 1 days, there wasn't a whole lot of game-ending plays. There wasn't a lot of stuff that happened early on, so it wasn't too far-fetched to be able to get to that 12 energy. And personally, that 12 energy, I think, was not only was it easier to get to than the 16, but I personally think it was a bit more satisfying to use just Whis, this badass that even Beerus could barely touch, to be able to defeat your opponent with. Next up on the list was Super Saiyan Blue Sun Goku. This was, I think, the worst, if not one of the worst, leaders in all of Galactic Battle. He gained 1,000 for each energy you had, which was not a big deal in the slightest. It might make the difference between a KO or making your opponent have to combo like an extra 5k or whatever, but it was just not good. I mean, sure, he got dual attack when you had 7 energy, but it's just a lackluster ability, especially compared to the other 2 blue leaders. And his once per turn was not even worth it. You got to draw a card, but you still only gained the same 1,000 for each energy. Again, it came down to, being able to outdamage or forcing your opponent to combo an extra card, but honestly, the leader was just terrible, especially considering how much we know Bandai loves Goku. Which is probably why his ace card got one of the special rares, and the card is beautiful to look at, especially to see it in person. The colors are just so vibrant, and the card itself was actually really good. Your opponent not being able to counter your attacks or activate blocker was a really big deal. 30,000 at the time was the highest besides the one Whis, and that really stood out back then. Now, he only had double strike, whereas some of the cards had triple strike, but even so, your opponent not being able to stop any of those attacks literally meant the difference between a victory and defeat. Now, easily the best blue leader in set 1, and arguably one of the better, if not the best leader in set 1, was the Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta. The ability to not only take a card from your life, to speed up your awakening and to give your leader crit was a big deal. Because critical at the time, like losing that card, is detrimental. I mean, it still is now. But when you didn't really have all the crazy draw power and stuff that we have now, getting that extra card was, make it or break it. And the leader's ability to do that, and also give him that extra boost if you made it to the energy. It was just, if you made 7 energy, he's a 25,000 critical. And if you combine that with the 1 cost combo to Champa, you give him double strike. It's 35,000 double strike crit. And at that time, that's hard to stop. And this leader stayed relevant at least for a couple sets after Galactic Battle, which goes to show how good the leader actually was. Now, he did get power crept, but he does still have some versatility. The fact that he's blue gives him a pretty good boost. Now, while we do have a lot of other leaders that have critical now, him being the only blue crit leader still gives him, I won't say an advantage, but it gives him something worth considering to play him. And the leader itself is just not bad at all. Now, while none of these leaders really supported individual archetypes, Vegeta did have his own boss card, and it had dual attack and critical, which basically gave you double strike crit damage. And when you evolve the card to getting rid of a blocker was really nice to, kind of get something out of your way so you could get that extra crit damage in. And that's right there, that's a lot of crit damage. Like, crit was and still is a big deal. And again, blue having all that crit was just, it was just a really, really big incentive to run blue among all the support that blue has. And I think that's why blue was, for a while, the most powerful color. We had Whis' Coercion, which was basically a free negate, because you had to have an energy open to play it, and it reset another energy. So it gave you a free negate, and then still had energy to combo out if you had higher cost combo cards. You had Sensu Bean, which gave you a power boost that was permanent for the turn. And giving that to your leader on your defensive step was really nice. But also giving you an energy back. So having an extra energy for free was really nice. Objection, allowing you to ramp up to be able to play your higher cost cards earlier. Again, like blue had everything. It even had results of training, which lets you awaken without being at 4 or less life. So if you were playing the long game, or you didn't want to take that damage, or your opponent was playing a stall game, then you had the result of training, and you could just awaken yourself and not have to worry about whether or not your opponent was going to deal damage to you, which with some decks now is a big deal, because some leaders don't have to attack to get their abilities, and some decks are all really stally anyways, like U7, Frieza, Victory Strike, stuff like that. So results of training back then was a big deal. It could be now, it's just too high cost to be able to play it. So while Red and Blue focused on the new Dragon Ball Super content, Green and Yellow put their focus on villains and things from the Dragon Ball Z era. Green, of course, being about the Broly saga, the Broly movies. You got the heroes that go along with those movies as well, but it was all about everybody's favorite, poorly written, crazy psychopath Saiyan. Now, I will give Broly credit. It was easily the best Green support that existed in Set 1 by far. Having hand destruction abilities was really critical to giving you a reason to play Green, although you didn't really have a lot of reason to play some of the other Green stuff that wasn't Broly specific. Now, while Broly did also hurt yourself, there were cards that kind of negated the effects that affected you from the leader, but being able to KO a battle card and be able to make your opponent discard a card, being able to force them to lose 2 cards just when he attacks, was detrimental in ensuring that you had more card advantage than your opponent. Broly also got a great amount of support in his set as well, especially the final stages. You had the 5-drop and the 6-drop that both of them force your opponent to discard 2 cards, and so the amount of hand control that you had with this deck was really impressive, especially when you compare some of the hand control we've got now, it goes to show that Green's place in the game was all about hand control, all about discarding, and this deck started it off right. It really did. I hate Broly as a character, but as an archetype, the Broly archetype literally set everything in motion, whether it comes from Cell or Android 13 or any of the other hand destruction archetypes that we have. Green also gave us another Goku leader, which, while not super great, wasn't terrible either. It was just a very simple leader. It dealt double strike damage, and having that permanent double strike was not a terrible thing, but it just felt like it didn't give you enough. The leader it didn't really do a whole lot to be able to provide to your overall strategy unless you were just trying to push extra damage, and it didn't really go with a lot of the stuff that came in set 1. It was a very nice leader to be able to use, and then of course when we got Feet Kamehameha, having double strike and being able to play one card to hit for, double strike crit just with your leader was cheeky, but not enough to have much impact on the game. Green's archetypes are also all over the place, whereas, Red was centered around Universe 6 and that saga, Blue was centered around Universe 7 and that saga. Green was just everywhere. Green had Broly stuff, it had Battle of the Gods stuff, it had Frieza saga. It was just it didn't have its own unique identity. Now, the Goku was really nice. It was easy to get a Krillin in your drop. You had a one-cost blocker that you could play. And when you played him, you could KO anything adding up to 6. So you get a couple free KOs. If you had Krillin in your drop, he's triple strike. It wasn't a bad card, but again, there just wasn't a lot of support to really go with it. And so you didn't see this a lot. I mean, there were people that played it because obviously Goku's one of the most popular characters, so he's got a lot of fans. And Frieza Saga, Super Saiyan Goku's first transformation, everybody loves that. But compared to some of the other stuff, there wasn't as much support for it, and there wasn't as much incentive to play it when the results of your efforts just weren't there, compared to running Broly and discarding your opponent's hand, or running Blue and ramping up to play your bigger cards. I don't know. I liked it. I liked the support, but again, there wasn't enough there to justify running it. Lastly, for Green, we had the Full Power Sun Gohan leader. The biggest thing that irritated me about it is the fact that the Awakened side is Super Saiyan. It's a Battle of the Gods saga Gohan. So, at that moment in time, he still had his full ultimate power. He still used it when he attacked Beerus. So, why he went to Super Saiyan when he awakened was beyond me. The leader itself was kind of unique. Being able to get a draw if you had more life. It kind of rewarded you for keeping your opponent pinned down. But it wasn't really anything that was game-breaking. On the other side, though, being able to pay 6 energy and just wipe your opponent's board was wild. Until Barrier came out, and that didn't really do much. But before that, just being able to KO everything, regardless of active mode, rest mode, how powerful it was, how much energy it cost, didn't matter. Gohan didn't care, he just annihilated everything. That was a good ability. Granted, it meant you probably weren't playing anything else for that turn, but if you had your board state set up, then you were fine. You come to turn 6, you've got a couple battle cards in play from the previous turn, and then you just blow up everything your opponent has, and then you're still free to be able to pick away at your opponent's leader. Now, like Red, Green was kind of lacking in overall support. The two best cards, I would say, was King Vegeta Surprise Attack, because being able to combo for the same amount you would for a super combo and get the revenge was a really huge deal. They were smart enough to make it to where you could only use it on battle cards, so you couldn't use it on your leader to trigger revenge, because that card did keep the 10,000 and revenge for the turn, which is why it was so great to use it now with blockers or the Deadly Defenders. And then Bandai did what they did with the revenge ruling, and it doesn't really work that way anymore. The Super Saiyan Go tanks, I don't recall it doing a whole lot during set 1. But during set 2, it made a huge difference with people playing like a blue-green variant, with this card being one of the main cards, because you're going to evolve him for 4 energy, and then on top of that, you're going to get 2 back. So you're evolving him for 2, and you draw a card to replace him from coming out of your hand. So the card itself, upon its release, was nothing too significant, but once set 2 hit and we got more support and we got more cards that you could play around with, green-blue was a terrifying deck to have to play against, especially with all the defense that it had, and was easily one of the bigger contenders for the meta during set 2, but we'll talk about that when we get to Union Force. Now, if I were to pick 2 colors that stood out above the others, it's definitely going to be blue and then yellow. Yellow revolved around the Frieza. I don't want to call it the Frieza saga. It revolved around Frieza himself and his army. We had a leader that was in that was a Resurrection of F. We had Frieza's army during the Frieza saga. So we had just anything that encompassed Frieza. Debatably, I would say the Golden Frieza was probably the best leader of Yellow in Set 1. Being able to choose one of your more useless one-cost Frieza's Army cards to play, get their ability, and then KO them to open up another energy was significant. And not to mention, you got to draw a card with that effect as well. So you replace the card you KO'd, and you got a free open energy to either do it again or have, a card for your opponent's turn, which was more likely to be the play. But then on the Awakened side, you were able to do it for 2 energy. And so this leader had kind of like a blue tint to him in the fact that he had that energy manipulation that blue has while having all the control aspects of a yellow deck. Now, Frieza's boss card was a bit of a menace, having triple strike, and then having the ability to not only place all of your all rest cards in the drop area, but then to be able to rest all active battle mode cards was just a ridiculous effect. It also got around abilities that say this card can't be KO'd, or when this card is KO'd, because you're sending them, you're placing them in the drop. It's not the same thing. Wasn't really as relevant in set 1, but as the sets went on, it gave him ways to get around abilities, although I don't think he was ever really used for it, because by the time an ability like that was needed, the game was just progressing at a faster pace than Bandai had probably anticipated. And so while the card would have been good to clear off some of those cards that just can't be KO'd, or the cards that had barrier, or stuff like that, this would get around that. But it was too late of a turn to play it. Turn 6 was just not as viable at the time that we needed abilities that got around barrier cards. We also got a leader for one of Frieza's most faithful servants, Captain Ginyu, and I like that on his Awakened side, he is Ginyu in Goku's body. I am disappointed that after all this, after even getting more Ginyu support through promos or through expansions, that we have not gotten a Ginyu in Goku's body battle card. That's just something that kind of irks me. This leader was interesting as well. He had an ability to not only play off of his archetype, but to also just generically wake your leader up to get to the Awakened side through his own skill, regardless of having your opponent attack or doing it faster with your opponent attacking you and you hitting yourself at the same time. Being able to give him double strike was an interesting ability as well, and he got a power boost the more Ginyu Force you had on your board. So this leader was really centered around his archetype, and that's one of the reasons I liked this leader so much. And I thought, Ginyu Force is just cool in general, but to have a leader that actually supports the archetype that goes with him instead of just somewhat supporting it like some of the other leaders, or not even at all, I think that was what made this leader one of the better leaders in the set, and definitely one of the more playable leaders as well. Captain Ginyu's boss card, Elite Force Captain Ginyu, again, really supported the archetype he was meant to be played with. When you played him, every Ginyu Force in your battle area gained 10,000 power and double strike. When he hit the board, it was pretty much game over. Then, of course, when we got that promo card, that made him easier to play. Although, Ginyu Force kind of died out around the time that promo was released. There was just better stuff to play. Although, I did try it out myself, and I saw some other people trying it as well. The promo did help a lot. But, again, it was just really nice to see how well the card supported its archetype. Now, the Golden Frieza leader, it didn't support its archetype, more or less it took advantage of its archetype. If, you use Frieza's army cards to pitch for the ability, but that was all it did. Whereas the Ginyu leader, allows you to play Ginyu Force cards. The Ginyu Ace card allowed you to power up all your Ginyu Force. Like, it actually encouraged you to play all the cards together that were meant to go together. Whereas some of the others, like the green non-Broly stuff, there was really no incentive to play it together without kind of mixing and matching with other archetypes. Yellow also had a second Frieza leader, this time being centered around the Frieza saga, and this leader wasn't terrible. I think both Frieza leaders saw a good fair amount of play. I think the Golden Frieza leader saw more play than this one, although this one by far was not a bad leader at all. Being able to, once per turn, put one of your cards in active mode, or on the Awakened side, being able to do 2. Like, you kept your stuff alive. If they had a blocker, you could attack with them and block, or just, prevent them from being KO'd. It gave you a little bit more control, and you could be a little bit more aggressive without having to worry about your things being vulnerable in rest mode for your opponent to KO them. But again, like the Golden Frieza leader, it didn't really support much, if anything, in set 1. It doesn't support anything, but it is a nice generic leader that is also a Frieza's Army card, which made all 3 leaders, all being Frieza's Army, equally viable to use Cold Bloodlust. Now, Cold Bloodlust looks like it should be a card for Frieza. The Captain Ginyu could use it as well, since it addresses Frieza's Army and not Frieza Clan. And Cold Bloodlust was, and even now, was a great card up until, of course, at the release of Set 7, it's going to be limited to 1. But that's how good the card is, the fact that they limited it to 1 because they want to increase the playability of cards. They also probably want you to have to use some of the new counter cards. Like, damn, Cold Bloodlust is such a good card. They're not going to run these yellow counters we make, so we're going to take them away. It also gave us Crusher Ball, which is one of the better counter cards in the game, even up to the standards of the new counter cards, just because as soon as the card comes out, it goes in rest mode. That prevents your opponent from even getting their when this card attacks abilities, whereas if they attack and you negate the attack with a counter, they're still going to get those skills triggered. Frieza's Call was another great card for 1 energy. You could call out anything 2 or less. That card worked nicely with the Galactic Emperor Frieza leader, because you could play it. The card has to come out in rest mode, but then at the end of your turn, you can switch it back to active mode. So it kind of allowed you to bring cards out and prevent them from getting killed simultaneously. And it gave you a little bit of an option, too. Not to mention being able to play a 2-drop on turn 1 with only 1 energy. It had its benefits. And then, of course, Bad Ring Laser, which is no longer going to be relevant. With Set 7, that card is going to be completely banned. It was the only card that allowed you to counter a counter card. Now, of course, the only counter cards we had were negates. And then, of course, Bloodlust and Crusher Ball, which are counter plays. But that's all you had, and it had to be ran with yellow. And I can see why it was dealt with. I can also see why it probably should have been dealt with a lot sooner. I'm not particularly mad one way or the other about it, but it did allow decks to win at an unfair advantage just because they could splash yellow and negate something that could have kept your opponent from, losing the game. Looking at you, Shinjita, whatever the hell you're called. Then, as is with every TCG to ever come out, when first set comes out, you've got to release a starter deck for it, and the leader for the starter deck was just one of the best. Getting to untap an energy when you attack, and then getting to untap 2 when you're awakened. Now, it had to be blue energy, so it kind of limited you to running blue. Although you could mix and match colors, you'd have to be smart about how you used your energy. And like I mentioned before, Soul Striker was very, very prominent in the Set 2 meta. And for good reason. The card is just, it's a good leader. A lot of people still try to make this leader viable, including myself. I've got a Set 5 blue Gotenks deck that runs this leader, as well as a Set 6 blue Vegito deck that runs this leader, because he's just that good. He does get punished by a few cards, but Tien is really the only one that matters, as far as I see it. Because Tien, his ability comes into play as soon as he's played, and it's permanent. Whereas, like with Mercenary Tao with green, his ability is while he's on the board, but he has barrier, but you can get around barrier. So blue gets hurt a lot more with cards like that, but it's still, you can get around it somewhat. But the leader itself is just fantastic. The starter deck also gave us 5 exclusive cards that you could only get in the starter deck. The Vegeta Prince of Speed was really the only relevant one. You could evolve him for 4, or if you just played him in general, as long as you had 5 or more energy, you got to draw 2 cards. He's a 20k double strike. Like, it's not bad at all. And being able to draw 2 cards back then, like, was a big deal. Now, of course, we've got cards and like strategies that can draw multiple cards in a turn, but being able to use that Vegeta to draw 2 was really a good ability, and it saw a decent bit of play, especially for blue decks, because it gave you a good attacker and it gave you a few extra cards to be able to play off of. We also got promo support right off the bat, which was really nice. It was a really good thing for Bandai to do that. Not only with the special pack promos, but with the BCC promos and the tournament pack promos as well. The Vegeta, who's a triple strike, if you had 7 or more energy, you could evolve him for no cost, which was a kind of a big deal, because getting to 7 energy wasn't difficult. But at the same time, all he did after that is come out for no energy. Now, while that itself is a big deal, because getting a triple striker for free, and then you could just combo your whole hand just to make sure that attack finally went through. On the other hand, the BCC cards, they've been kind of hit or miss. I don't recall the Intrepid Determination Bardock doing a whole lot. Him being a 4 cost and KOing up to 3 or less was not too significant. He was a 20k battle card. I love Bardock. He's one of my favorite characters. I love the art on this card too. I wish it was foil. But it was a step in the right direction. And again, some of the BCC promos have been fantastic, and some of them not so great. The Bardock was kind of in between. And then lastly, we had tournament pack support. Each tournament pack had 8 cards, 2 variants, 1 foil and 1 non, and some of the cards were much better than others. Now, the Proud Spark Vados, it allowed you to give both itself and your leader an extra 5k and double strike, so it wasn't bad. It was nice for leaders that actually you wanted to attack with. It helped out in general, but it was especially nice for the Vados leader. The Super Saiyan 3 Goku, on the other hand, was extremely powerful back in Set 1, giving all of your red cards, plus 5,000 power, and he went back to your hand so you could keep playing him every turn. That card went up to, I believe, at its peak, $110 for a foil. Absolutely insane. Especially now when you look at it and it's like $1. Maybe $2. But that's because we got cards that were like Pan, that did the same thing, also gave him double strike, although you couldn't really reuse her. You could just play another one, but that's another conversation for another time. Both cards had their uses, but the Goku was infinitely superior. Probably the most used of the tournament pack cards. Now, the blue cards in the tournament pack felt a little out of place for a few reasons. The energy attack Trunks required you to have a future Trunks to reduce his energy. It would be a 1 cost. 1 cost 15k if you had 3 or more energy. It's nice, I guess, but there was only two Future Trunks at the time. They were both green, unless you were running a green-blue deck and you wanted to run the Trunks plus these. Like, the Trunks 1-drop, he couldn't attack battle cards, but, 10k 1-drop wasn't a big, wasn't something to scoff at the time. And the 4-drop allowed you to get a card back, and he had Double Strike and, I believe, Revenge. So, like, he was a decent card, but I didn't really see much point to mix and match them. Also, he's Battle of the Gods Saga, so why he has any interaction with Future Trunks is beyond me. Light of Hope, on the other hand, was a really interesting card, as it gave himself and your leader 5,000 power during your turn when you had 5 or more energy. And in a blue deck, that was easily, a very viable thing to get to. But again, the card didn't really do a whole lot. It was very generic for any leader, didn't care what color you were using, you would just have to use blue to be able to play him. But it is one of my favorite promos from set 1 just because it's Future Trunks and the foiling is just amazing. Then with green, we got a little bit more Broly support in another card that allowed you to KO a battle card. And he had Double Strike, which 15k Double Strike is not really too intimidating. I don't really think this card was necessary. If it would have made your opponent discard a card, it would have fit the theme a little bit more. Your leader already KO'd stuff, and so the extra KO is nice, but it wasn't really game changing if you're running it with the Broly support. On the other hand, we had the Perfect Cell card, which had Double Strike and Revenge, so if they wanted to kill it, they were going to have to sacrifice a card as well. And once per turn, when your opponent comboed, you could choose one of those cards and just put it in the drop, so they wouldn't get the combo card. And I don't know, I feel like the promos were kind of like a hint. Like a hint at what we were getting. We got the Future Trunks, but we had no Future Trunks support for Super that we did end up getting in Union Force. Same thing with Cell. There was no Cell or androids at all in Battle of the Gods, in Galactic Battle. But then when we got Union Force, we got a butt ton of Android and Cell support. So I feel like it was kind of a hint at where they were going with it. But at the same time, in their initial release images for set 1, they had what ends up being our set 4 Piccolo leader, and we didn't see barely any Piccolo cards at all up until that point. So I don't know if I want to give Bandai that much credit. Then again, with yellow, it really felt like Bandai was trying to hint at future releases with Set 2. We had the Super Saiyan 3 Goku that obviously really didn't have a place in Set 1, and it was in the Buu Saga, which hints at all the Buu Saga stuff we got in Union Force, the Cell, and the Future Trunks, and then the Cooler. Like, the Cooler was just, it didn't fit anywhere. He's not even Frieza Army. He's Frieza Clan, but he's Frieza Army, or he's not Frieza Army, so he doesn't get any of the benefits of that archetype. And being able to have critical when you had 7 more Frieza Clan, like, you could use him with a Frieza deck, but it was just an extra 5k. It wasn't really game breaking. Now maybe if he was 20,000 and got the critical and the double strike, it might have made more of a difference, but on the other hand, the Clan of Terror Mecha Frieza was a devastating card, especially at later points. It was actually probably worse later on than it was during Set 1. Like, you could play one of your opponent's cards, but that's kind of really all it did. It did allow you to see your opponent's hand as well, but I feel like the Mecha Frieza got better as the game went on, and there were more ways to play it, more ways to abuse its ability. And that pretty much sums up the history of the Galactic Battle set. Honestly, I feel like the meta was diverse. You saw people running Champa, Vados, Hit, Broly for sure. You had the Beerus and the Crit Vegeta, definitely. And then all of the yellow leaders. So really the only thing you didn't see, you saw Gohan here and there, but not a whole lot, just because green was kind of the weakest color, especially if you're ignoring Broly completely. And the Goku leader, and then the blue Goku leader was just awful, just terrible to use. So if you were going to use any blue leader and it wasn't Beerus or Vegeta, you had Soul Striker. So you had options. And that's what was nice about the game back then. And we still have options now. I feel like just more people are going to run the same thing now because they know it works, versus having just this vast diversity that we had, especially during the older days of the game. But this was a much longer video than I had anticipated it to be. I'm going to enjoy doing this series. It's just going to suck that it's going to take as long as it did to do these videos. But I do hope you guys enjoy them. And maybe you enjoy looking back on the nostalgia of the game. We all get caught up in the now and the current meta and how things are, but getting to look back and think on, how great the game was when it first came out and all the cards we got to use and stuff. It's nice to look back and reflect on that and to see how the game has progressed over the course of just the couple years that it's been out. But if you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys are looking forward to seeing more videos on the history of the Dragon Ball Super card game, make sure you hit that like button down below for us. We appreciate the support. We appreciate all of our subscribers and you guys just supporting our content in general. I do apologize again that the video took longer than anticipated, but this is probably going to be a daily series. I wanted to start this a few days ago. I just didn't have the time to do it. So it's going to be a daily series leading all the way up to set 7, where we'll discuss from here all the way up to Destroyer Kings and the anniversary box. So with that, though, we're going to go ahead and get the frig out of here. And we'll see you guys in the next video.